Green Street Hooligans reminded us that football was never just a game. It was loyalty, family, and a war fought in the streets. But the real fate of its cast became even harder to believe. One cast member died tragically, another completely reinvented himself, and the faces you remember know the same as you has known. Join us as we discover their real names, real ages, and their real life after 21 years. Elijah Wood. When Green Street Hooligans was announced, many fans wondered why Elijah Wood would risk everything he had just earned from The Lord of the Rings. At only 24, he had become one of the world's most recognizable faces as Frodo Baggins, and Hollywood expected him to keep playing gentle heroes. Instead, he deliberately chose Matt Buckner, an ordinary student thrown into one of London's most violent football firms. That decision became the first step in escaping the shadow of the ring. Rather than chasing bigger blockbusters, Wood kept moving toward darker, independent films, determined to prove he was an actor, not a franchise. Years later, he surprised Hollywood again by publicly claiming that child sexual abuse had long been protected inside the industry, a statement that divided opinion, but reflected his willingness to speak when others stayed silent. At 45 in 2026, Elijah Wood still avoids the obvious path, building a quiet career and an even quieter family life with Mette-Marie Kongsved, far from the spotlight that once seemed impossible to escape. Charlie Hunnam Pete Dunham, the fearless leader of West Ham United's Green Street elite firm, became the role that introduced Charlie Hunnam to audiences around the world. At just 25 years old, Hunnam looked completely convincing as the fearless football firm leader, even though his own life had once felt anything but under control. At just 19, he impulsively married actress Catherine Town after only 3 weeks of dating, a decision he later described as one of the biggest mistakes of his life. The experience taught him to slow down, but another challenge arrived years later when non-stop work pushed him to physical and emotional exhaustion. Hunnam shocked Hollywood by walking away from the lead role in 50 Shades of Grey, explaining that he simply could not keep sacrificing his health for success. Looking back, leaving that career-defining opportunity may have cost him a blockbuster franchise, but it also gave him something he values far more: balance. At 46 in 2026, he continues making films on his own terms while remaining with Morgana McNellis, the partner who has stood beside him for more than 2 decades. Claire Forlani. Claire Forlani brought warmth to Green Street Hooligans as Shannon Dunham, Pete Dunham's caring sister, and the wife of Steve Dunham when she was 33 years old. Many expected Hollywood to keep offering her leading roles. Instead, the opportunities slowly began disappearing, leaving fans wondering why one of the industry's brightest rising stars had faded so quickly. The answer would not emerge until years later. During the #MeToo movement, Forlani revealed that she had rejected Harvey Weinstein's unwanted advances several times and believed those decisions had quietly closed doors that might otherwise have transformed her career. Suddenly, the mystery surrounding her disappearance no longer seemed like bad luck, but another example of the hidden price many actresses paid in Hollywood. At 54 in 2026, Claire Forlani continues acting while enjoying a quieter life with her husband, Doug Ray Scott, far from the industry that once seemed ready to make her a major star. Mark Warren. Mark Warren had already spent nearly 2 decades proving himself on British television before Green Street Hooligans came along in 2005. At 38, he was cast as Steve Dunham, the former Green Street elite leader who believed he had finally escaped the violence that once defined his life, only to discover that some pasts never truly stay buried. Unlike many actors who hoped the film would become a passport to Hollywood, Warren quietly returned to Britain after its success and continued choosing complex television roles over blockbuster fame. That decision never made him the loudest star of his generation, but it steadily transformed him into one of Britain's most respected character actors. Years later, That patience paid off when Van der Valk finally placed him at the center of an international television franchise. Now 59, Warren is still working as consistently as ever, proving that, unlike Steve, walking away from one chapter of life can sometimes be the very thing that leads to an even longer career. Ross McCall. Whenever trouble erupted inside the Green Street elite, Dave was usually close behind Pete Dunham, standing with his friends instead of seeking attention for himself. There were no fiery speeches or dramatic betrayals attached to his character. At just 29, Ross McCall gave Dave an understated authenticity that made the friendship within the GSE feel believable rather than staged. That same approach shaped McCall's career after the film. Instead of chasing one career-defining blockbuster, he quietly built a resume that kept expanding across both British and American television, moving from Band of Brothers to White Collar, Luther, Lucifer, The Offer, and Silo, while gradually stepping behind the camera as a writer, director, and producer. Off-screen, however, life proved far less predictable, with 2 highly publicized engagements ending before marriage despite years together. Rather than letting those disappointments overshadow his future, McCall simply kept working. Now 50, he continues building new projects, and Dave remains one of the earliest reminders that some of Green Street's strongest characters never needed to be the loudest. Jeff Bell. Long before Jeff Bell became the terrifying Tommy Hatcher, he was cleaning offices and doing manual labor to support his family, never imagining that acting would become his second career. By the time Green Street Hooligans arrived in 2005, Bell was already 42, bringing years of real-life hardship to a father whose rage was fueled not simply by violence, but by the loss of his young son. That emotional authenticity helped turn Tommy into one of the film's most memorable villains, yet it also reinforced the image Bell could never quite escape. From that point on, directors repeatedly cast him as gangsters, crime bosses, soldiers, and hardened criminals, making intimidation his trademark on screen. Rather than fighting against that reputation, Bell embraced it, quietly becoming one of Britain's busiest character actors through projects ranging from Rock'n'Rolla and Warhorse to Top Boy, Rogue One, and His Dark Materials. Now 63, he is still working steadily, proving that the career he started later than most has ultimately outlasted many that began much earlier. Rafe Spall. For years, every success Rafe Spall achieved came with the same sentence attached to it. He's Timothy Spall's son. Green Street Hooligans captured him before he had escaped that shadow, when the 22-year-old actor appeared as Swill, one of the younger faces inside the Green Street elite. Instead of trying to outrun the comparison, Spall gradually let his work do the talking. A dramatic weight loss transformation broadened the roles available to him, while performances in Prometheus, Life of Pi, The Big Short, and Trying slowly shifted public attention away from his surname and onto his own talent. Even when his marriage to actress Elise Dutoit ended after more than a decade together, he chose to keep the breakup largely private, refusing to let personal headlines overshadow his career. Now 43, Spall has become one of Britain's most respected actors, and Green Street Hooligans remains a fascinating snapshot of the moment before he stopped being known as somebody's son and became a star in his own right. Kieran Bew. Ike never hesitated when the Green Street elite marched into a fight. While others shouted, he simply stepped forward, making loyalty his defining trait long before violence ever was. Kieran Bew was only 25 when he played the role, and the physical confidence he brought to Ike wasn't something he learned on a film set. It came from years of competitive fencing and combat training. Ironically, the very skills that made him so convincing also brought injuries that complicated the career he hoped to build. Green Street Hooligans became one of his earliest screen credits, but the breakthrough everyone expects after a film like that never arrived. Instead, Bew spent years quietly moving through British television, accepting one supporting role after another while waiting for the opportunity that matched his abilities. That opportunity finally came much later with Beowulf. returned to the Shieldlands before Warrior and House of the Dragon introduced him to audiences around the world. Now 45, Bue's career stands as proof that some actors don't miss their moment. They simply reach it much later than everyone expects. Henry Goodman. Henry Goodman had already conquered Britain's stages long before he quietly became the heart of Green Street Hooligans. At 55, he played Carl Buckner, a father haunted by the loss of one son and terrified of losing another, bringing a lifetime of theatrical experience to one of the film's most restrained performances. Yet only a few years earlier, his own confidence had suffered a devastating blow when he was unexpectedly dismissed from the Broadway production of The Producers after just a month following creative disagreements with Mel Brooks. For many actors, a public setback like that could have defined the rest of their career. Goodman chose a different path. Returning to Britain, he immersed himself in theater once again, rebuilding his reputation through performance rather than publicity, while continuing to appear in films ranging from Notting Hill to Captain America, The Winter Soldier and Avengers, Age of Ultron. Now 76, he continues working across stage and screen, and although Carl Buckner remains one of his finest film performances, Goodman's true legacy has always belonged to the theater, where resilience became just as important as talent. Joel Beckett. Unlike the men throwing punches in the streets, Terry spent most of his time behind the bar, where countless meetings, arguments, and celebrations of the Green Street elite unfolded. As the pub landlord, he provided a familiar gathering place for the firm, making his character a quiet but recognizable part of the film's world. Joel Beckett was 31 when he took on the role, adding another memorable project to a career already built on British television. Before appearing in Green Street Hooligans, Beckett had become widely known as Lee in the original British version of The Office, and later as Jake Moon in the long-running BBC soap EastEnders. He also appeared in acclaimed productions including Band of Brothers, Holby City, and later the action film 6 Days. Although he never became a major Hollywood name, he remained a familiar face to British audiences through a steady stream of television roles. However, his years on EastEnders also came with a price. Beckett later spoke about the intense pressure of working on one of Britain's biggest television shows, where relentless filming schedules and constant public attention affected his mental well-being. After leaving the series, he found it difficult to break away from television and secure the kind of major film roles that could redefine his career. Now, at 52, Joel Beckett continues working as an actor while maintaining a much lower public profile than during his soap opera years. Looking back, Green Street Hooligans preserved him in one of the film's smaller but familiar supporting roles, while his lasting legacy remains closely tied to The Office and EastEnders, two of Britain's most influential television series. Terrence J. Jeremy Van Holden never belonged to the Green Street elite. As the arrogant American student whose reckless actions set much of the story in motion, he became one of the first people Matt Buckner realized he could no longer trust. Around 20 years old during filming, Terrence J. gave Jeremy just enough swagger and selfishness to make the character's brief appearance leave a lasting impression before the story shifted to London's football firms. Green Street Hooligans became the defining project of J's acting career, but his contribution extended well beyond appearing on screen. He also wrote and performed several songs for the film's soundtrack, including One Blood, the emotional anthem that accompanied the movie's unforgettable final sequence. He later appeared in films such as Buried Alive, The Spirit, and Punisher: Warzone, while continuing to develop his career as both a musician and composer. Despite making a promising start in Hollywood, Jay found it difficult to maintain the same momentum as an actor. Rather than continuing to pursue leading roles, he gradually shifted his attention behind the scenes, focusing on songwriting, music production, and creative projects that allowed him to combine his passion for film with music. In 2016, he founded Nirvana Handpan, a company specializing in handcrafted steel musical instruments, opening an entirely new chapter in his career. Today, Terrence J. is 41 years old and is better known for his work in music than for his acting. Although his filmography remained relatively small, Green Street Hooligans secured him a unique place in the movie's legacy, not only as Jeremy Van Holden, but as the artist whose song One Blood became inseparable from the film's emotional ending. Jamie Kenna. Whenever the Green Street elite needed someone to stand on the front line, Big Mark was usually there. With his imposing build and unwavering loyalty to Pete Dunham, he embodied the intimidating presence that made the firm so feared by its rivals. Around 31 years old when Green Street Hooligans was filmed, Jamie Kenna looked as though he had stepped straight out of the football hooligan culture the movie was determined to portray. Long before acting became his profession, Kenna had pursued a very different dream as a semi-professional footballer. The constant threat of a career-ending injury eventually forced him to rethink his future, leading him to make the difficult decision to leave the sport behind and start over in acting at an age when many performers had already established themselves. His persistence gradually paid off with roles in The Bank Job, Clubbed, EastEnders, Coronation Street, House of the Dragon, and later Gran Turismo, where he continued building a solid career as a dependable character actor. Changing careers so late meant Kenna had to work harder than many of his peers to prove he belonged in the industry. Instead of landing instant breakthroughs, he spent years earning smaller supporting roles while steadily gaining the trust of casting directors. That determination eventually transformed him from a former footballer into a familiar face across British television and film. In 2026, at 52, Jamie Kenna continues to enjoy one of the busiest periods of his acting career. Looking back, Big Mark remains one of his earliest memorable screen appearances, introducing audiences to the tough, authentic screen presence that would become his trademark for the next 2 decades. Johnny Palmiero. You could easily miss Gary if you blinked, yet he was one of the familiar faces that helped make the Green Street elite feel like a real brotherhood rather than a group of movie extras. Standing alongside Pete Dunham's firm through its most dangerous moments, Gary reflected the loyalty and unity that defined the group. Around 30 years old during filming, Johnny Palmiero became part of one of Britain's most memorable football hooligan dramas. Unlike many actors who pursued blockbuster careers, Palmiero built his reputation almost entirely within the British independent film scene. He appeared in productions such as The Business, Cashback, Bonded by Blood, and The Last Heist, earning steady work as a dependable supporting actor. While his name rarely appeared above the title, he became a recognizable presence in gritty British crime and drama films. Now, Johnny Palmiero is 51 years old and still represents the kind of hard-working character actor who quietly keeps British independent cinema alive. Although Green Street Hooligans remains one of his best-known films, it also stands as a reminder of the many dedicated performers whose contributions helped give the movie its gritty authenticity. So that's the Green Street Hooligans in 2026. More than 2 decades later, which actor changed the most, and who was your favorite character? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more Then and Now videos.